If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by visiting kriskarl.com/podcast, where you'll find links to both Patreon and PayPal, where you can make donations. Any and all support is massively appreciated, and a huge thank you to everyone that has supported thus far. Let's start off where we always start, with how it is that you found photography. What was it that made you pick up a camera for the first time, and why did you go down that road of becoming a photographer?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. I was doing a lot of partying, and I was hanging around the wrong people, and I kind of broke away from that, and I started like hanging out in nature more. I started going hiking, and I took a trip out to California with my friend, and I took along a little 10 megapixel point and shoot with me, and I was taking pictures of our trip, and I kind of got really into it then. And that's really where it started. And when I got back, I broke my collarbone, had to get surgery. So I was like, I was out for everything for like 6 months. And I did a lot of research then. I wanted to buy a DSLR. I wanted to, take photos, and I was just sitting around. So I was doing so much reading about it. I was seeing other photographers. I was getting inspired by them, and I didn't really have any money because I wasn't working, but, so I didn't buy anything yet. I would like steal my sister's Canon Rebel, and I would just take photos when I was sitting around the house. And, so once I kind of healed from that injury, I went out into Oregon, and I took that same 10 megapixel camera. I went out to stay on a family farm. I was woofing. So you basically volunteer on the farm, and they house you for free. Right. And I basically took that camera, and I was just taking pictures of the everyday life on the farm. And that's really where it took off. I was like getting so inspired by just even the little 10 megapixel camera, just like clicking the shutter and capturing like all the little moments. And then I did some traveling up and down the California coast again with that camera. And once I got back home from that trip, I bought a camera and, kind of just took off from there.
Do you remember a point in the process? Because obviously everybody takes pictures, especially now they take pictures all the time. Do you remember a point in the process where you took a picture, or you had a day out shooting and you were like, I'm a photographer? You're no longer just out taking pictures, but you're now a photographer.
Yeah. I went to Assateague Island in Maryland. And this is before I actually bought the camera, like my main camera when I first started. Like I said, I stole my sister's camera, and I went to Assateague Island, and there's a bunch of wild horses there. And I basically was taking pictures of all the horses, and it was like, it was pouring rain, and these horses were in this field. And that's basically that moment, like you said, it hit me. I was like, wow, I'm actually like, creating something, for myself. And this is really something I consider doing for the rest of my life.
Something that drew me in with you, and it's something that I find fascinating whenever I see any photographer that's able to do it, is that you kind of skirt two different genres, and you have a consistent style through both, and you don't seem to have one being stronger than the other. To me, it feels like they both complement each other really well. Let's start there. What, in terms of subject matter, what's your favorite thing to photograph?
So yeah, it started with the landscapes. I was like, that's one of my biggest inspirations is just nature. So, I was taking pictures of everything in nature and my travels. And then I started taking portraits of my friends, and, just connecting with people and taking, their portrait really, really stuck with me. And when I first started, I was shooting, so much, like that's all I wanted to do was shoot with people. And I would reach out, and, some people would say yes, some people would say no. So, it would have to be portraiture, because I just love that connection when you create something with somebody, and it's not just you have to, work with them and be inspired by them and their expression and who they are as a person. So I love that when you connect with them, it kind of brings out this different type of creativity than when you're just taking a landscape photo.
Which one do you actually find harder to come away with what you were looking for?
Well, definitely the portraiture, because, you have to try to, work with another person and see where you guys can go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always easy, and it's definitely a challenge. And, sometimes I don't like how the photos come out, but I think every artist knows that, you're not going to be happy with everything you create. But at the same time, it's always, a challenge to push yourself and be creative with somebody.
I mean, in terms of maintaining that style, maybe it's just an instinctive thing because you're the person behind the landscapes and the portraits. Is that a conscious thing, though? Is that something that you were very keen for there to be the mix of? Because when I look at your Instagram, it seems to be landscape, portrait for the most part. And is sort of the idea that one feeds off the other.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that, I just like to share whatever I'm feeling that day. But there's definitely something subconsciously in my mind when it comes to that, because, we're a part of nature, and, it seems as though like we're kind of going away from nature and we don't really realize how integrated we are with nature. So it's really important to, spend time outside and, show that we are, as humans, like part of nature. So that's why I kind of go back and forth with it, because it plays an important role with who we are as a species.
In my job, I sort of do two different lines of work, one being portraits for models, for agencies, actors, and so on. And then the other side of things, my main job is as a wedding photographer. And quite often I use portraiture to play off of when I'm maybe having a harder time with wedding photography or I'm not enjoying it as much. And then I use wedding photography when I'm not enjoying the portraiture as much. Is it the case that you maybe hit a wall a little bit with landscapes, so you go and do some portraits? Or if you hit a wall with the portraits, you'll go and do some landscapes?
Yeah, I guess you could say it like that. But sometimes you just need to take a step back from something and, focus on something else. And then once you come back stronger and you have a different view on it, a different perspective. So yeah, I could say like when I'm doing portraits, I kind of, maybe get tired of it or I don't feel inspired by it, that I'll go and spend a day by myself and, take pictures of like rivers or, farm animals or whatever, just, take anything I can get. But I feel like that's definitely something that, comes about when I'm shooting, both sides.
So if we go down the portrait route for a bit, then this is where I'm probably going to feel a little bit stronger. In terms of subject choice, what's your selection process for the people that you photograph? And what makes a good subject to you?
Oh, that's so hard, because it really comes down to whoever chooses to shoot with me. I see artists and things on Instagram, and I reach out. Some people don't answer, some people answer, but I kind of lean towards people who, I see like a story. I see their story through their work, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I could see, all the traumas and the happiness and the things that they've experienced in their life. That definitely plays a big role in who I'm shooting or who I reach out to, and sometimes when people hit me up to shoot, sometimes I say, yeah, sometimes I say no, because sometimes it just won't fit, or sometimes it will fit with what I'm trying to, to go for.
And in terms of your directorial style, how are you in the sense of I guess it's an interesting one because everyone's personality plays so much into it that it's not always a conscious decision. But how are you directing a subject?
I would say I'm all over the place. Sometimes, I'm really, it's kind of crazy, because sometimes I'm like, super laxed about it and I just let it go and see where the model or the subject can take it. But sometimes I actually pose and show the person who I'm shooting with how to pose, and I get into it because I've done some modeling here and there. I've taken self-portraits. I've posed for, photographers, and I kind of like, if I really want something, like a different pose or a different expression, I actually do it myself and I show them how to do it. But that's not always, the way I want it to go, because like I said, I think everybody has their own story. So I want to try to capture that, like their expression, their emotion. So it's tough,
I mean, you've mentioned story a couple of times now, and something with your work that really stands out to me, and it's something I think is missing in a lot of modern photographers. I mean, I'm probably just shitting on young people here, but in a lot of modern work, there's a lack of narrative, there's a lack of a story. And I think maybe some people think that because something is a still frame that you can't impart any kind of mood or narrative, and things just have to be like pretty or perfect or, well edited or whatever. Where it feels like with your work, there is this real narrative element to what you're doing. How much goes into the planning of that? Do you have an idea to begin with and you spend a long time working it out, or is it something that comes off the cuff on a shoot?
Sometimes I try to plan it out, but when we try to plan things in life, they don't always go the way we plan it.
Yeah.
But so whenever I meet with somebody, I kind of just, wing it and see where it can take me, because everybody's different. So you can plan something I can plan something in my head, but when I get to the shoot and it just doesn't fit with whatever is going on, I kind of just see how they are and, try to see if I can bring out something that, wasn't necessarily planned for. And like you said, like I see a lot of people, just taking pretty photos, which isn't bad, I'm not going to hate on other artists. I think art is subjective. So when I try to take a photo, I need to bring out a story in it, like even if it is like just like a plain portrait or, I try to bring out this like story, because we're all stories in the end. And, stories are what make, the world go round. And it really is something super important in my work, because without that, I don't know where I would take my portraiture or even landscapes,
Where does that feed of wanting to put narrative into your work come from? Are you a cinephile? Do you like watching movies and it's come from that? Did you grow up around art in the family? Because obviously it's not the most obvious step for people in photography to add narrative, because otherwise we'd see it a lot more often. It's actually the case quite often. It feels like people that get into photography do so for technical reasons. They tend to be interested in the gadgets or they're interested in the technique. To have that interest in narrative, where does that come from?
I didn't really grow up doing that like much of art. My brother, he was actually a really good drawer. So I was always inspired by him when I was young, because he was super talented when it came to drawing. And, it didn't, like in high school, I played sports in college. And then once I got out and, like I said, I was doing the partying, I kind of broke away from that. I realized that like, I just wanted to create something, and movies definitely played a big part in it, because I love the cinematography in movies and the way they shoot it and the way they bring out their story. I could care less really about the gadgets and the camera I have or whatever, it really doesn't play a big part, so trying to bring out the story is most important. I don't know where it comes from. Sometimes it comes from my own experience. I've had some pretty crazy experiences in my life, near death experiences, and that definitely plays a part in where I want to go with the photography. And it's hard sometimes to bring it out. I try to write some things down, some thoughts, not necessarily planned for the shoot, but yeah, it definitely comes from my own experience and how life, is really crazy at some points in your life,
Well, this is an interesting point that we're kind of heading towards here, because we're in a bit of an arms race at the moment. As I guess I really don't like designating stupid little labels, but in Western society, we're in a bit of an arms race to see who can look the most successful on social media, regardless of whether or not it's true. As long as you look successful, then that's all that counts. And something that I think is really important to art is difficult experience. I feel like the best art always comes out of tragedy or comes out of hardships, tough times. And it doesn't have to be something horrendous that's on a global scale, but even just interpersonal issues. I think the best music comes from people that have had struggles. The best art comes from people that have had struggles and so on. Do you feel like, and obviously I apologize for this being quite a broad question out of nowhere, but do you feel like perhaps people's constant need to seem as if everything's going great for them is actually going to affect their ability to create art?
Yeah, I think so, because it's like you said, it's like this arms race to, get followers and get likes and just like seem like they're, successful with the numbers, and they'll just shoot whatever, is trending or whatever will do good on social media. And it kind of sucks because it doesn't force people to create something different,
You mentioned earlier about you've done some modeling for other people and you've done some self-portraits and stuff. How much does that feed into your understanding of what the person you're photographing is feeling and how they're reacting to you?
It's definitely a vulnerable place to be in front of the camera. So I know how difficult it is to, put yourself in that situation and be vulnerable for somebody that's taking your photo. So I understand when a model doesn't feel like she could do something or he could do something, or they don't feel comfortable with that pose or whatever. I know how it could be. And when I'm in front of the camera, it's definitely taking me out of my comfort zone. So I can only imagine somebody else, say you meet for the first time and you're doing a photo shoot with somebody, you don't really know that person. You just know their Instagram or their social media or whatever. So I know how uncomfortable it could be and the challenge it can bring.
With regards to the way that you kind of curate the art that you come into contact with, the photography that you come into contact with, something that I've preached about for quite a while is, especially for new photographers or for photographers that are struggling a little bit with a creative block, is to start to clear out whatever it is you spend the most time doing. And I would recommend people don't spend the most time on social media if they can avoid it. But if that's where you are, try and have the feed of work that's in front of you when you're scrolling through social media be stuff that inspires you rather than stuff that just pisses you off or demotivates you. So, for example, with my Instagram, I don't have anything political on there at all. If someone posts stuff that's political, I do tend to just mute them because I don't want that to be part of what that app does for me. I'm a very political person otherwise, but that's my time away from it. And I only have photographers or people on there that are inspiring to me and they post work that I actually want to see and will make me want to go out and produce more work myself. And I think a lot of people use social media as a way of, like you said, developing followers, building up numbers rather than maybe using it in the way that's most useful. Do you feel like social media can actually be something that we can use to become more inspired and more proactive as artists?
Yeah, I agree with totally what you said. I do the same thing. I mean, no hard feelings, but I've muted so many people just for the fact that I would see something they post and it's just something I don't want to see really when I'm, scrolling. I'm trying to, be inspired by other artists and support people who I think create, beautiful work. And the way we're going now with everything, it's something that could change, but I hope it does change. But social media has become more of like an activist type platform, and if you don't show activism on it, then you're this, quiet person behind the scenes or whatever. But I try to, like you said, I try to follow people that, keep that stuff offline because, you don't really know somebody off of social media. They could be a totally different person than what they're posting. They can, be a quiet activist. They don't have to share it on social media. They can, support the right things off of social media. So that's something that we really need to like work on as a community and try to strive for, is just to, create art and share art and support art and not worry about other things that just don't pertain to, art.
Yeah, I think we're in the golden age of looking like we care about something is more important than, actually being good people, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, it's like this whole perception, this false perception on social media. It's definitely not a good route that a lot of people are taking, and I hope it changes.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, I have no faith left in mankind after the last couple of years, but hopefully I'm wrong. I'm married, so I'm quite often wrong.
I try to see the beauty in it.
That's because you're an artist, you see. I'm just a photographer. As far as your, we'll stick with portraits for one more question, and I promise I will get to landscapes. I have to kind of protect myself from something that I'm less knowledgeable with. But with your portraits, there's obviously a lot of, it feels like there's a lot of conceptual work going in. There's like we mentioned, the narrative. There's not just stuff that would just happen without there being some driving force behind it. What's your process in terms of planning with concepts? Do you storyboard? Do you collaborate with the subject, or is it something that you're very much at the steering wheel of?
Yeah, I'm really at the steering wheel. Whenever like a model asks for a mood board or like what they want to create or whatever, I tell them to look at my page, because I love getting inspiration from other people and movies and stuff like that. But whenever it comes down to my work, I'd rather just keep it, something that is similar to what I'm creating, like, so I never send out mood boards or anything. Like, I know that's, probably frowned upon and people probably don't like it, but it's just something that doesn't go into the process of my work,
Well, if there was one process for all of us, then it would be quite boring. So it's always nice when people deviate.
Exactly.
And you've got to do what suits your way of working and makes you want to do it in the first place. Is it the case that, I know I said one more question, but I'm a liar. I'm English. Is it the case that is it the case that you are working like one piece at a time? So when you take, you get on a set and you're shooting, or not on a set, but you're photographing someone, that you are working towards one image per set, I guess. And you're not looking for multiples from that set. You're just looking for the one image that's going to stand out. And then once you've got that, you're moving on to a different idea.
I'm shooting fully film now. It's been about 2 years. I sold my digital. So obviously, I try to take as, little shots as possible when it comes to that. But yeah, when I'm shooting with people and I get like I think I get a certain shot that I'm looking for, I try to change it up and, I try to go on to the next, story, I guess, and the next scene, I guess you could say. I don't try to stick with it and try to take like a multiple shots of the same thing,
Why just switch to film?
So I was shooting a lot of digital in the beginning, like I said, I was just shooting and I'd be getting like hundreds of photos a shoot. I'd have to go through 400 photos or whatever. And it was just so overwhelming that I would never be happy with the result. This, like, that instant gratification you get when you can like see the shot right after you take it, was not helping my creativity. So I started shooting film. And once I started shooting film, I got those results back and I was just so happy with the results. You kind of forget about it for like 2 weeks, and then, or whatever, however long it takes you to send out the film and get it developed. And like, whenever I would get the film back, I'd be so happy with it. And, I would feel inspired to shoot again. And so I sold my digital. And once I started going fully film, it forced me to be more creative with my shot, and not have to worry about getting the perfect shot, because, there is no such thing as a perfect photograph. So when it comes to film, I love the imperfections that it brings. And, because life isn't perfect. And I try to like bring that out in my work, because I don't care about being perfect. And like we talked about earlier, I don't care about my perception online. I could care less. And I've definitely lost a lot of followers or whatever, and don't get as many likes as I used to with the digital work, but I'm posting what I like and I'm shooting what I like. And it's something I'm happy with, Do
you feel like you shoot differently? I mean, obviously in terms of having to be more selective because of the lower number of shots that you can get, but do you feel like it's changed you as a photographer, the medium switch?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed me as a photographer and an artist, because now with the switch, it's more about catching those moments, those in-between moments, those moments we don't really care about or we don't really, necessarily see, so I try to be more selective with it, but also I try to be more, and I don't know how to say it, but I try to be more focused on, trying to get something that will mean something to me in the end.
Right. And it's not just a case of it having to be like aesthetically nice. It's something that actually has to carry some purpose.
Yeah, there's got to be purpose in things we do. And like we talked about earlier, there's not a lot of that going on social media. It's just like, doing trends and taking photos and posting the best things that'll work. I try to find the purpose in, those in between moments and those moments that, necessarily we wouldn't think twice about.
Your work is something that really, really has inspired me quite a bit to kind of reevaluate some of what I'm doing, which is exactly what it's supposed to be for, I guess. When you're looking at other people's art, it's supposed to be kind of reflective of yourself. And that's been great. Let's talk about landscape so that we can reflect on how little I understand how to take a good landscape photo, because I am an absolutely atrocious landscape photographer, to the point where when I do like establishing shots at weddings, I'm just thinking to myself, God, I suck at this.
I think the same thing when I take landscapes.
Oh, okay. When it comes to landscapes, one of the things I've learned with the podcast is that landscape photographers can be quite concerned with taking the same photo as someone else. There are a great swath of people that all go to, I don't know, let's say like Banff or wherever, and they take a picture of the same lake from the same angle that everyone else has taken. That tends to be the way a lot of photographers are, is they're very sort of copycat. And then a lot of the ones I've spoken to on the podcast have been almost proactively trying to ignore as much of a location as possible before they go and photograph it, so they don't get caught in the mindset of doing the same thing that someone else has done. They try and see it with fresh eyes. Is that quite important to yourself when it comes to doing landscape photography?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been to Banff. I took photos in Banff, and my favorite ones were the ones that were not at the main locations, I guess you could say. I was trying to, find smaller moments and smaller places, just like the beauty in nature, without, focusing on those picturesque Instagram photos.
And is it the case that when you turn up on the location, like, I guess with film, it's got to be different, but how long from you arriving to you taking the first shot? How much scouting on location are you doing? So
I didn't take the trip to take photos necessarily. So I just take my film camera along with me. I went hiking with my cousin, and we basically just went hiking, and wherever I would see something nice, I would take a photo of it. It was mostly a spending time in nature trip, and I went to Colorado and Utah over the summer, and it was the same thing. We just basically drove to the sand dunes. We spent the night there. We drove to Moab and Arches, and I took so many photos along the way that the main photos, those main spots, I didn't really care for. I didn't even really post those. And yeah, they're nice. They look nice, but my favorite ones are the ones that basically are off the beaten path.
You're kind of grabbing, in a lot of cases with your work, it feels like you're grabbing a slightly tighter version of what someone else might see in a scene. I mean, one thing I know about America, having spent quite a lot of time over there, is that it's a big country, and a lot of the views are very, very big views. It's not like you could photograph the whole scene and have anything that's really worth taking. It's more, you have to pick out individual slivers of the big view, and that's a skill in itself to kind of pick out from the bigger portion. But with your work, it feels like you kind of grab these little corridors in terms of views. Quite often, not always, but quite often it feels like your frames are kind of what they would say in cinema is like dirtied up. Like there's something foreground, there's something kind of framing the main subject of whatever it is that you're photographing. One in particular, which I'm actually just going to double check where it was taken. The one that's in Jasper National Park, there's a lake leading along, and there's like cliffs either side of the lake with trees. That framing, that kind of dirtying up of the frame so that you get a framing overall, like a frame within a frame. Is that something that you work quite hard to find, or are you just shooting on site for what just jumps out at you?
Yeah, I try to frame it. It's just so hard, especially with film, because you can't see what you're taking a photo of until you get the photos back. So I try not to worry too much about it. And it's different with the portraits, because with the landscapes, I try to just have more fun with it and just enjoy the moment more. I'm not trying to get like those perfect photos. I just like to travel and see nature, and taking photographs along the way just makes me happy.
I mean, you're pretty much based in the perfect place, almost on Earth. I can only really think of like one or two places that would be a better place to be landlocked in terms of the amount of locations and the variance that you can go to across the United States. You've already mentioned California and well, you've pretty much mentioned everywhere in between Oregon, Utah, and so on. Is there a particular place that's your favorite location?
Yeah. So when I first started photography, that was really like the last time I was out in California on the West Coast. And so I haven't really been over there. I haven't really been traveling too much with my camera. I've done a little bit of traveling, but my favorite spot ever to go to is basically, I would say West Jersey. And right here in New Jersey, I would drive around the farmlands and, just try to find, those beautiful landscapes out here right in my home state.
And how hard is it I don't really know many people and obviously I'm nobody, but I don't really know many people that photographed New Jersey that extensively. How misinterpreted is New Jersey as a state?
Oh, it's so misinterpreted. I mean, people think it's like this dirty place and, it's, whatever, Jersey Shore, Guido type stuff. But I think it's beautiful. You drive out an hour away from the city. I live basically right outside of New York for my whole life. And I rarely go to the city. But you drive out an hour out west, out up north. It's just so beautiful. And I love finding those little in between pockets, like you said, those beautiful little areas that just stand out, and I can enjoy the moment. I can breathe and it feels safe out there. And it really is a beautiful state if you look for it.
With your overall portfolio, are you trying to, is there like a greater goal in mind? Are you building up a selection of images with like a kind of a mass work for, say, something like a book? Or is it a case of just going sort of shot to shot or shoot to shoot and just amassing work in that way?
No, I don't really have a plan for where I want to take this. I just like to create with people. I like to create with nature, and it would be nice to come out with a book. So many people have said, friends and stuff have said, you should come out with a book, a coffee book, or I would buy it, whatever. But I don't really make too much. I don't make money off of this. I just like to do it for my own, doing, and eventually maybe I'll try to pursue, this full time, but I work full time. So it's kind of hard right now, but yeah, there's no greater goal here other than creating and my passion for the art itself.
No, I have not shot enough film to know exactly how this works. So this is a question from complete ignorance. When it comes to photographing portrait shoots on digital, it's quite easy to know when things aren't working because you're looking at the back of the camera, maybe something's just not working out, and you can see it, right? But when you're shooting on film, maybe you don't quite realize something's not working out, or you don't have the ability to reference it with what's not working out. How do you go about sort of fixing a shoot where it's not going exactly to plan when you're shooting film?
So when I'm looking through the viewfinder, if I don't like something or if it's not working, I try to change it up. I try to think about it, think about how I can change it, maybe perspective, angle, or how the subject is. And you don't really, like you said, you don't really get the results until you get the film back. So if it didn't work, it didn't work, but usually it works. Usually I'm happy with how it comes out, even if it's not perfect.
Well, it's an interesting thing because I've been there. I used to have this I have this horrible work ethic where I feel like, so I've done, I think I did about 115, 120 podcasts last year. So in 2020, about 120. And I would get to the point where like at the end of like 3 days in a row of just solid podcasts, I would be like, I think I'm going to take like a month break. Honestly, I've just done so much. I need to sort of refresh. I need to step away for a bit. And then by that evening, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not really doing much. I should be doing some podcasts. I'm just sat around doing nothing. And I've got this horrible work ethic that won't let me relax or won't let me kind of step away. With what you're doing, how important is it to have that time away to refresh that artistic side?
I think it's important. This past year, obviously for everybody, it's been hard. I really haven't done too many portrait shoots. I actually just did one recently last week, and it was very inspiring just to myself. And I think, taking a break from everything is good, but at the same time, I think it's bad because I think creativity is like a muscle. And if you don't work it, it kind of gets weak. So if you step away for too long, you come back and it's kind of like you lost it. And that's how I felt last week when I did a shoot. It kind of felt like I lost it. But once I started getting rolling, after a few shots, I started thinking more. I started trying to get more creative, and it kind of started coming back to me. So, this year I'm trying to plan to shoot a lot more than I did last year, just to push myself creatively and as an artist and see where that could take me. So I'm trying to go full force this year, even though obviously it's going to be tough, but you also do need breaks, and I work full time. So I guess you could consider that my break, so I spend a lot of time working and not focusing on the photography. And I try to work out. I play sports here and there. So that's sort of my refresh from art.
Do you feel like if it was something you were doing full time, you would burn out?
Yeah, I think if you're doing full time, you could burn out, but at the same time, it could be really good. It could like push you to change it up and see from a different perspective. But if I were to ever take it full time, I don't know which, route I would take. I don't know if I'd want to basically just promote my work and try to be like a independent artist or whatever. I don't think I really fit with brands and that type of stuff. I'm more of just like art itself, I feel like.
It's definitely the case. I feel like, I made the switch, I think about 5 or 6 years ago. Time's absolutely flying by, but I think I made the switch about 5 or 6 years ago for it to be my job. And there is definitely a change in the way it makes you feel when you're no longer taking photos because you enjoy it, but it's now like you need to take these photos and they need to be great. They need to do their job.
Yeah.
It definitely changes the sort of the onus on you. And when you're not enjoying it, it can definitely change the pressure that's on you, which can be a real shame. And I've spoken to a lot of people that have no interest, despite loving photography. They have no interest in it ever being something that they rely on for income, which I completely appreciate. When we look at your overall, body of work as a photographer, and you look at the time you spent with a camera, what advice would you give yourself from the position you're in now to you when you were starting out that would maybe speed things up or make things go a bit smoother? What changes would you make?
I guess I would tell myself to just enjoy the moment more and enjoy the body of creation you're creating. Because when I first started, I was just shooting digital. I was just like, the shutter was like a machine gun. So I would tell myself to slow down a little bit, not to rush it. At first, obviously, everybody gets caught up in the Instagram. I was trying to get my followers up and all that type of stuff, but I could really care less about that now. So if I were to say anything to myself, 4 years ago when I started, is just to slow down and enjoy it.
When it comes to image selection, I feel like that's the last stage of editing yourself. When you're selecting what images actually make the cut, it's probably the most important stage. Do you refer to anyone else? Do you talk to your subjects about what ones work and what ones don't? Or is that something that you take on as your responsibility alone?
Sometimes I'll talk with the person I'm shooting with about it. Sometimes it's just my own doing. But most of the time with the film, I'm not too like I said, I'm not too focused on that perfect moment. So I've been sending, people who I shoot with a lot of the photos, like maybe 90% of the photos I'll send back to them. Maybe 2 of them didn't come out well or out of focus or whatever. But I try to send every single frame, even if I don't like it, they might like it. And that's not my place to, judge it or judge myself on the work or judge them on the work. I don't really care about my perception online. So it could be like a bad photo in my eyes, but maybe they'll like it.
You bring up something that's kind of opened up a question in my mind there. And perhaps I'm being completely ignorant, but something that seems to be more and more of a, how do I put this? Something that seems to be more and more of a favorable aesthetic for the general public is like that film aesthetic. We're seeing like film borders being used on digital images. Instagram is full of filters that replicate the look of film. There are presets that are sold to make digital photos look like film. And you've just mentioned like 90% of the photos that you're taking on a shoot, you can send over. How much of that is that you're slowing down the process and you're taking more deliberate photos, therefore they're better, versus how much of that higher hit rate is down to the imperfections of film actually being favorable?
I try to, slow down in the shoot, and even if it doesn't work, I don't really edit my film photographs.
Right.
When I get the scans back, I'll go through them, and maybe sometimes one will need like exposure or a little bit of contrast or whatever. But when it comes down to the overall end product, I'm happy that I can, shoot things, and even if I don't like it, I still think it looks good. And the moment you captured is a great, moment that could be shared with the person you shot with. When I first started shooting, I would only send, a certain amount of shots, but I would take like 500.
Right.
And that's not the case with film. It's more of like this nostalgic feeling of like imperfection and fleeting moments that I like to share it's like a whole story in the role of film, if that makes sense.
Yeah. 100%. Well, all I was going to say was my personal reason for picking up film in a serious way about 12 months ago was I've become quite disillusioned with retouching. I think that it's been, I don't want to be mean to anyone here, but some retouching is just on fucking steroids at this point.
I feel
we're
that.
literally adapting people into these bizarre mannequins. And it's not from an ethical point of view, because I honestly couldn't care less as far as that kind of thing goes. I think that when you look at so much of, like we mentioned earlier, like the doctoring of your life for social media, I think that people being ethically upset about, retouching of a celebrity on a magazine is absolutely daft when people are lying about how successful they are in everyday life on their social media. I think that it's like the most contradictory morals in the world. So I couldn't really care from an ethical point of view, but just aesthetically and in terms of the workload, I just become completely disillusioned with the amount of retouching that was being expected from certain industries. And going to film meant that I could kind of circumvent that by using film as the barrier of, well, I don't need to retouch it in the same way because it's film. It's meant to have this aesthetic. It's meant to be more honest. Everyone goes into it for a different reason, but it's for you. Is that kind of, I mean, it's a bit of it sounds a bit hipsterish, but is the honesty of film something that really sort of aids your work?
Yeah, that definitely plays a big part. Because when I was shooting digital and editing the photos, I would just become so frustrated. I just would not enjoy editing, and it would take away the enjoyment of creating art. So the changing to film, I don't even, like I said, I don't even really touch the photos afterwards. And it's so much better in my eyes that I don't have to alter the image. There's more honesty to the photo. And it definitely played a big part in switching over, because I can't stand editing. I don't even know how to use Photoshop. Lightroom is, what I've used, and digital photos would just be too crisp and too clear that I just couldn't stand the editing process at all.
And last question, I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. It's a 2-part question, so again, I'm a liar. But if you were to do a bit of self-evaluation, which is something that all artists like to do at all hours of the day, to the point where it can affect their sleep and so on, speaking from experience, if you were to do a bit of self-evaluation here, what do you feel like your biggest strength and conversely your biggest weaknesses as a photographer?
I guess you could say my biggest strength is capturing that story in the image and those like fleeting moments that come with it. And my biggest weakness would definitely be, end product, because I guess it's not mainstream. And I guess you couldn't say end product, because I like the end product myself, but biggest weakness is, trying to change up my creativity and try something new, because that's always a challenge.
Right. So the most important part of the podcast is for me to force other people to like stuff that I like, so I can eventually reach my goal of being a big human algorithm and just making everyone like what I like, and then I'll get more of what I want. The way that we do this is that I send as many people as possible over to find your work. So where's the best place for people to see what you do?
On my Instagram. That's basically where I share most of my work. Darien Pannella, Darien Pannella.
And also Twitter, you said?
Yeah. And I also have a website. I started, selling prints at dariensbook.com, DARIENSBOOK.com. SBOOK.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me.